This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
President Xi Jinping calls on the WHO to lead the global fight against the coronavirus. South African President Ramaphosa says Africa backs the WHO but needs help with debt relief and supplies. And the Egyptian government releases coexisting COVID-19 plan. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live only on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua live in Nairobi. Ramanyang joins us now with your business headlines.
That's right, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. East Africa's largest brewing company, EABL, has issued a profit warning. And amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, the world's third largest economy has now fallen into a recession. We'll have the latest data on that and plenty more in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Mahia.
Thank you, Rama. Well, the World Health Organization has kicked off its first ever virtual assembly. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a speech at the opening ceremony via video link. He called on the WHO to lead the global fight against the coronavirus and reassured the world that China was always transparent and responsible in its handling of the outbreak. Zhen Chuying has more.
The 73rd session of the World Health Assembly has been slashed from 3 weeks to 2 days. Ironically, during one of the modern world's biggest health crises, Chinese President Xi Jinping said it was crucial the meeting went ahead.
在人类抗击新冠肺炎疫情的关键时刻,
It is meaningful and critical to hold a meeting at this time amid a COVID-19 pandemic. The virus has hit more than 210 countries and regions across the world. It has impacted 7 billion people. The disease has taken the lives of more than 300,000 people. I mourn the individuals who lost their lives to the virus. I also want to express my condolences to the families who lost their loved ones.
President Xi called on all nations to do more to bring the pandemic under control. He said China would continue to share its knowledge on the virus with the world.
经过艰苦卓绝努力,
After collective efforts and suffering great losses, China has turned the tide on the virus and has safeguarded people's health and livelihoods. All along, we have acted with transparency and responsibility. We have provided information to those in governance in the most timely fashion. We released the gene sequence as soon as it was available. We shared all information and knowledge with all relevant parties. We have given our best to support and assist other countries in battling the virus.
Xi made a few proposals near the end of the speech. First of all, he called on all parties to continue prevention measures, enhance testing methods, and to work towards developing a vaccine. Sharing information in a timely manner was also necessary to stop contagion. Secondly, he said the WHO should lead the global effort in fighting the virus. China will provide $2 billion in international aid over a 2-year period. Thirdly, Xi called for more assistance for African nations. 46 Chinese medical teams stationed on the continent have all joined the effort in battling the disease. Fourth, Xi said the global public health emergency response system needs to be enhanced. All parties should establish an efficient response mechanism in reaction to future events. Fifth, the restoration of economic and social development in an orderly fashion should be conducted under the guidance of WHO. Sixth, Xi said the outbreak has shown us that the world is a community with a shared future for mankind.
让我们携起手来, 共同佑护.
We will work together to safeguard the health and livelihoods of people around the globe. Together, we will work to protect the earth and build a public health community with a shared future for all mankind.
President Xi said China would continue its efforts to develop a vaccine. He said it would become a public health product to be used in combating the virus.
Well, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa joined other leaders from across the world in supporting the WHO. Ramaphosa is currently the chairperson of the African Union. During the WHO's World Health Assembly, he affirmed Africa's support of the organization. He also noted that Africa needs help in the form of debt relief, diagnostics, drugs, and medical supplies. The World Health Organization has been criticized by the United States over its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. This comes as the organization looks to help countries build their capacity to fight the virus. Well, as the World Health Assembly gets underway via teleconferencing in Geneva, the COVID-19 pandemic will be the main focus. The disease has affected over 4.5 million people worldwide. Over 300,000 are already said to have lost their lives, and the global economy has been badly affected. Africa has not been spared either. CGTN's Noel Makubu looks at how the World Health Organization has helped African countries combat viruses, including the coronavirus and other diseases across the continent.
The World Health Assembly is the decision-making body of the World Health Organization. All the 100 report titled The Work of WHO in Africa, the body has been dealing with what it terms as the unfinished agenda. This includes dealing with neglected tropical diseases which continue to affect many African populations silently. Since August 2018, the Democratic Republic of Congo has been battling the deadly outbreak of Ebola. The disease has killed over 2,000 locals and even spread into neighboring Uganda. The Great Lakes nation has also been facing another health emergency posed by measles. In all these, the World Health Organization has been working with local authorities and the international partners to combat the diseases. The global body is also involved in immunization campaigns across the continent against different diseases such as polio, tuberculosis, diphtheria, and among others. This is achieved through the Global Vaccine Action Plan. The HIV/AIDS scourge that is still ravaging populations in Africa still forms a response core function of the WHO. Through strategic partnerships with governments and other donor agencies, WHO has been instrumental in preventing non-communicable diseases such as cancer. Through its push, over 12 countries have ratified laws on production, sale and consumption of tobacco, which is a leading cause of lung cancer. With malaria being the world's biggest killer of children, many African countries are vulnerable to the disease because they lie in the tropics. Countries such as Kenya, Ghana, Malawi, Uganda, Burundi, and Rwanda, among others across the continent, continue benefiting from the WHO endeavors. As the world focuses on the current COVID-19 pandemic, world politics have not spared the global body. However, it is hoped that the current dark cloud will soon pass, and the World Health Organization will continue with its unfinished business in Africa. This is an agenda that, if left unattended to, could have deadly repercussions in the continent, whose health systems remain weak. Noel Makugu, CGTN.
The African Union has downplayed recent attacks on the World Health Organization and its Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus. Officials of the African Union Commission and Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said the United States should rethink its decision to halt funding for the WHO. From Addis Ababa, here is Girum Chala with the details.
Since the coronavirus outbreak towards the end of 2019, the world has been hit hard. Hundreds of thousands of deaths have been reported and millions are still sick, not to mention the painful economic meltdown the pandemic has caused. But at a time when many countries are calling for a united front, attacks against the World Health Organization and its Director General have been getting louder. The Africa Centers for Disease Control Director says he is worried about the lack of focus on the real enemy.
This is his first question.
The enemy is the virus, and it's a dangerous virus. We are at war, and if we politicize this it will be devastating for us. I would never have imagined, as a public health virologist for 31 years, that I would live to see such a fast replicating, evolving situation that is that devastating. We only used to, when we studied virology, we studied this in the textbook, and it was 100 years ago in 1918 that we saw such a situation. So it is serious, has everything to do with the looming disaster. But we should, as Dr. Tedros said, let's stay focused, put our eye on the ball, and the enemy is the virus, not WHO, not Dr. Tedros or African Union.
The African Union is deeply concerned about the United States' plan to slash funding for the World Health Organization. According to the deputy chairperson of the African Union Commission, that decision will weaken the global health body.
This is the time for the whole world to come together and recognize that we are one people, one world, with one destiny. This is not the time at all to cast aspersions on anybody. Even though we have followed with some misgivings the statement given by the United States President, who we have a lot of respect for, we are dismayed that they want to use this to cut funding to the WHO at a time when the WHO needed utmost support. So for us as Africans, we support Dr. Tedros totally. We recognize his work. He's been thrown in at the deep end, but he's performing credibly as far as we're concerned. And everybody, every peace-loving, every objective person who operates without prejudice appreciates this.
Many on the continent now want China to play a key balancing role here. Analysts say defending the WHO and Director General Tedros Adhanom based on facts helps. The Chinese mission to the African Union has time and again also condemned the move by the United States of attempting to blame China and the WHO over COVID-19. Chinese authorities have called the United States accusations against the WHO and its Director General unfair. Grumjara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The Egyptian government has released a coexisting COVID-19 plan. The detailed 25-page document has been composed by the Egyptian Health Ministry. It divides life under the coronavirus into 3 stages and urges the public to implement these steps until the pandemic is over. Here is Adel Mahroui with more.
Egypt declared 3 lifestyles to live under the pandemic, according to the severity of the infection rates. The 3rd stage has the lightest measures. It will continue until a vaccine is available for COVID-19. It includes avoiding crowds, abiding to general personal and commercial hygiene standards, and the regular public inspection for the disease.
Egypt believes the COVID-19 pandemic will stretch from 1 to 2 years. During that time, infection rates will go up or down, so we must learn to live with it. The ministry's vision includes full lockdown of all schools and universities until the virus disappears completely. There is no intention to resume education in the foreseeable future.
The 2nd stage is stricter. It should last until a drop in infections is noticed for 28 days. During that stage, everyone must wear face masks, get checked for symptoms while entering a public transportation or place. All entertainment facilities and cafes will be shut. And the 1st phase adds a lockdown to all indoor sports facilities, dedicating areas in public transportation for the elderly and pregnant women. It will last until a drop in infections is noticed for 2 straight weeks. Parliament is now working on legislations to enforce these guidelines through laws. Violators will be fined.
If implemented properly, I believe these measures are sufficient to curb the coronavirus. But I think the main challenge is the public abiding to them. Focusing on raising awareness could be more effective than enforcing fines on people.
In brief, there are 6 main points in Egypt's COVID-19 coexisting plan. It basically sets general healthcare rules for public sites, aiming to protect people at high risk.
The Health Ministry is also recommending the use of digital solutions and online payments to decrease interaction with citizens as much as possible. Egypt wants to coexist with the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's becoming clear that there is no return to normal life anytime soon. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
New information technologies continue to multiply in the fight against COVID-19 across Africa. In Mali, a young physics technician has created speaker drones to help authorities raise awareness on the coronavirus pandemic among rural populations. Here is Asta Tal with the details.
The rapid rise of COVID-19 cases in Mali is worrying. The situation triggered Musa Jara to use his mechanical skills to serve the community. He has created a speaker drone that flies above Sibi village, educating residents on COVID-19.
Our target is those populations that do not believe much in the existence of this disease. We're also targeting those people who live in very remote areas of Mali, who have no access to a television, radio or the internet. The drone helps in creating awareness on COVID-19.
The small aircraft captures our attention because we have never seen it before. I very much appreciate this initiative and I would like to thank whoever who designed it. I've learned a lot of new things from it in the course of my message.
Jara heads a technology company. His company has a training center in robotics and advanced technologies. According to him, he trains the youth on how to program drones. Jara's drones are different from the normal ones because he makes them using recycled materials.
70% of the components are made from used plastic bottles and plastic waste. We also make our own programs for the drones. Of course, we use other programming software, but we make our own and encrypt it ourselves.
In the meantime, Jara continues to use his drones to encourage his fellow Malians to follow social distancing measures. Asta Tal, CGTN.
African policymakers have called on the AU, SADC and other African regional bodies to support Madagascar as the continent builds its capacity to contain the spread of COVID-19. This after the southern African country launched an herbal remedy which it claimed can cure and prevent the spread of COVID-19. CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy brings us more in this report.
When Madagascar introduced an herbal potion that could potentially cure COVID-19, the country was hailed with a swell of pride in a product steeped in African traditional medicine. The announcement caught medical experts who have scrambled to find a cure for the disease by surprise. From West to Eastern Africa, countries rushed to order plane loads from Madagascar. But Antananarivo soon faced a wave of concern from key players within the world's leading pharmaceutical companies and the WHO that it hadn't been sufficiently tested.
It is not in the West's interest to have either Kenya, Madagascar or Mali or Egypt come up with a vaccine or that kind, because it's going to destabilize the pharmaceutical industry, which is hegemonically controlled by the West. So we are not talking about business interests here. But with COVID, it's not business. It is humanity. We are facing an existential threat.
Named COVID Organics, the tonic is derived from Artemisia, a plant with proven efficacy in treating malaria. Peter Kagwanja, President and CEO of the Africa Policy Institute, remains convinced that a COVID-19 medicine lies within reach in Africa and seems to suggest that with the help of China, it can be universalized.
China is going to intensify its search for a vaccine. It is going to share its scientific knowledge with the rest of Africa. And it can also work with countries like Madagascar to see whether really this medicine can be universalized or can be given the standards that are required so that the world can accept it and buy it.
With COVID-19 being a new virus, analysts say African regional bodies must rally in support of Madagascar's new innovation from an African perspective.
The World Health Organization has maintained that Africans deserve to use medicines tested to the same standards as people in the rest of the world.
Scientists say even if therapies are derived from traditional practice and natural, establishing their efficacy and safety through rigorous clinical trials remains critical. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Stay with us as we take a short break now. Here's what's coming up on Africa Live. 5 political parties in Benin battle it out in local elections amid COVID-19. And renovations on Egypt's Tahrir Square mirror COVID-19 restrictions to attract tourists.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Somalia now, where flooding has affected nearly 1 million people in the central part of the country. According to the United Nations, at least 24 people have died and about 400,000 people have been displaced by the floods. The body has warned of possible disease outbreaks due to crowding in temporary shelters. Beledweyne is the most affected district after the Shebele River burst its banks, inundating 85% of the town. The flooding has threatened to cut off the main road connecting Beledweyne to the airport. The UN says this could disrupt the delivery of emergency humanitarian supplies to the town. At least 20 people have been killed in an attack on a village in the northeast of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The attack happened on Sunday night. Local leaders have blamed it on fighters of the Cooperative for the Development of the Congo militia group. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
The overnight raid happened at Njala village in the northeastern province of Ituri. Authorities say fighters from the Cooperative for the Development of the Congo militia group, CODECO, killed 20 villagers with machetes and injured 14 others. The attackers reportedly fled the village after UN peacekeepers arrived. The militia group is composed of fighters from the Lendu ethnic group. The group has had long-standing grievances with the Hema community of herders. The two communities have been fighting over land and the control of resources in their gold-rich region since 1972. Intense violence broke out between 1998 and 2007 that left thousands dead and many others displaced. Renewed fighting flared up again in 2018 after mysterious attacks and massacres. UN monitors say more than 200,000 people have been forced to flee fighting in the region over the past 2 months. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Now, in Benin, local elections got underway on Sunday despite the COVID-19 pandemic. 5 political parties are vying for seats. Here is Astetal with more on that story.
This is the Abomoye Kalavi polling station in Benin's capital, Cotonou. Despite the threat posed by the coronavirus in the West African nation, voters have come out to cast their ballots as they seek to exercise their choice in local leaders. To them, COVID-19 is just but one of many problems that they want to be addressed.
I live in Cotonou. Our commune needs a mayor who can fulfill the desires of citizens. We dream of building infrastructure such as markets, roads and many others, so that Cotonou becomes a major player in the sub-region.
What we can expect from our elected representatives is development of Cotonou, our capital. I will still like the problems we have, especially flooding, social problems and development problems, to be a top priority of the elected representatives.
In an effort to minimize the spread of the virus, the Electoral Commission and other partners have put hand sanitizers as strategic points. Voters are also wearing face masks.
I would like to thank the Autonomous National Election Commission, SENA, not to say the government, which did everything possible to ensure that the vote was held without contamination by the coronavirus. The vote this Sunday, May 17th, will not be an open door to the spread of COVID-19.
Up to 5.4 million registered voters cast their ballot. The voter turnout is still considered a little lower than expected. 5 political parties are battling it out as they seek to control over 1,800 municipalities across the country. As the vote counting gets underway, the West African nation awaits the outcome. Astatal, CGTN.
The arrest of Rwanda genocide suspect Félicien Kabuga came as a shock to many. The French Justice Ministry says Kabuga had been living under a false identity in Paris and has been on the run for over 20 years. But just how did the news affect those living in the same building as him? CGTN's Jane Keo reports.
Saturday morning was eventful for residents of this nondescript apartment building in a Paris suburb. At about 7:30 a.m. local time, the French army arrived and arrested one of their neighbors, now known to be Félicien Kabuga. Kabuga is suspected to have been involved in the 1994 Rwandan genocide. He's been on the run for about 26 years and is accused of funding militias that massacred about 800,000 people. His neighbors, however, say he did not display any signs of being violent or hostile.
The gendarmes came here during the morning to arrest the man, Félicien Kabuga. For sure, what happened was shocking. He was an old man, very old. He was sick. And when we look back at what could have happened 25 years ago, of what he was accused of, certainly it's very shocking.
They say Kabuga, who appeared sickly, hardly spoke to anyone and constantly took walks.
From time to time, I would see this man going out, maybe once a day, alone or with someone. He wouldn't say a word, nothing. Maybe it's been 4 or 5 years that he's lived here. We didn't know his name, nothing.
Yes, I encountered him. I saw him. He was taking walks every morning. I suppose it was to get his circulation going. Seeing that he was sick, he wasn't the type to talk. He was very weak.
The 84-year-old is Rwanda's most wanted man and had a $5 million bounty on his head. According to the French Justice Ministry, Kabuga was living under a false identity. His neighbors say they were really shocked to see his face on various news outlets. They want him to pay for his crimes if the courts find him guilty.
Upon reading the articles on the internet and the newspapers, it was surprising, especially for the people around him. But well, life continues.
It's not scary, but it's good that some things are resolved. And if the courts can do something, especially for the victims, we feel strongly for the victims. So this is for the better.
Rwanda has welcomed the arrest of Kabuga. The country says it will work with the United Nations International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals to ensure that justice is delivered. Jane Keo, CGTN.
Let's turn to Egypt now, where the iconic Tahrir Square has been undergoing a major makeover. The project was aimed at attracting more tourists before the coronavirus pandemic hit. Work is, however, still ongoing, although it has been adjusted to observe COVID-19 restrictions and safety protocols. Here is Adel Mahroui with the details.
For months, 7 government entities have been collaborating to implement the biggest renovation project Tahrir Square has ever seen. The site for the 2011 and 2013 uprisings is being converted into an open-air museum. And with the seat of the government moving to a new Egyptian capital, this will become an area dedicated to tourism.
Tahrir Square has a deep place in our hearts as the location of the revolution. Since 2011, it went through several renovation phases. Lately, though, we are planning a pharaonic parade that will see the mummies of 22 ancient Egyptian kings get transported from the Egyptian Museum to the Museum of Civilization. That encouraged us to give the square an ancient Egyptian look.
At the heart of the square, a 19 meters high ancient Egyptian obelisk is now standing. It's being surrounded by 4 sphinx, acting as its guardians.
The entire Tahrir area is being renovated, not just the square. All buildings surrounding the square are classified as unique architecture. The newest is 130 years old. We have worked to restore these buildings to their original looks. We have removed all billboards to preserve the general look in the area.
To the sides of the obelisks, artificial waterfalls will be installed resembling the River Nile. Olive and palm trees now surround the pedestrian passage that connects the square to the Egyptian Museum.
We want to bring international attention to this project, so we will extend an invitation to 150 of the world's kings, presidents, and leaders to attend the pharaonic parade that will be held here.
From the plant's use to lighting, all the details in this project have been tailored to give Tahrir Square a touch of ancient Egypt. The square's inauguration is set for June 30th, but the bigger event, the parade for the 22 mummies, will be delayed until the global travel restrictions are lifted and tourism can resume. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And it's almost time for all the day's business. Rama is here with the latest.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in business. Kenya-based East African Breweries issues a profit warning. And the world's third largest economy has fallen into recession amidst the COVID-19 pandemic.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Let's start in Kenya. East African Breweries Limited, the region's largest brewer, says that its profit after tax for the year ending in June is likely to fall by at least 25% year on year. And it's citing the effects of the coronavirus pandemic as the reason why. Closure of bars and other entertainment spots right across the country, plus a ban on social gatherings and other leisure activities, have all combined to have a pretty negative effect on demand for alcoholic beverages. The leader in Kenya's alcoholic drinks market has, however, deployed a raft of measures designed to minimize the impact this pandemic is having on its business. ABL, which is majority owned by the British drinks group Diageo, is the biggest alcoholic beverages company in Kenya. The company reported $107.66 million in net earnings for the year ending in June 2019. EABL also operates in neighboring Uganda and Tanzania. Africa Oil Corp has announced that Tullow Oil has submitted a notice of force majeure to Kenya's Petroleum Ministry. Now, the notices, according to the news release from Africa Oil, are as a result of the impact that this pandemic is apparently having on company operations. Further developments like tax changes and travel restrictions, the firm says, have affected the project's economic viability. Now, in addition to all of that, a decline in global crude oil prices has also worsened the viability of Tullow's operations. The statement of force majeure is forward-looking, and it seeks to clarify the position of Tullow Oil in the project due to present and potentially future developments too. The notices do create room for discussions for the future of the drilling in blocks 10BB and 13T. At the same time, they also give room for improvement in the operating environment. Egypt's government will be lending its national carrier, Egypt Air, $127 million due to the impact of this pandemic on its operations. The Finance Ministry said the government will support the state-owned carrier until it returns to about 80% of its 2019 operations. Egypt Air has continued flying some domestic routes and repatriation flights for citizens who've been stranded abroad. It is a member of the Star Alliance led by Germany's Lufthansa, and Egypt Air stopped regular international flights on the 19th of March when the government over there closed the country's airports in order to slow down the spread of the virus. Egypt is allowing hotels to reopen for domestic tourists on condition, however, that they operate at no more than 25% capacity until the end of May. From the 1st of June, hotels will be allowed to work at up to 50% of their capacity. Now, this pandemic, as you're seeing from the stories you're reporting on here, has devastated economies right around the world. For people who have been already damaged by other crises, like Libyans, for example, who sought refuge in Egypt, the situation is even worse. But some Libyan enterprises have started humanitarian programs to assist these refugees. With the details, here's CGTN's Adel El-Marouki.
As Libya's neighbor, Egypt is one of the favored destinations for citizens of the divided nation. Scores come here fleeing the war and seeking jobs, education or healthcare. When the COVID-19 pandemic forced Egypt into a lockdown, many Libyans were greatly affected.
I own a restaurant here. When the pandemic started having an effect, I found people calling me, asking for one meal for a family of 4. I was astonished. When I asked why, I realized that people were running out of money and they cannot receive finances from Libya anymore. Now I can help those who can reach me, but there are many others stranded here. That's why we made that initiative.
Ibtihal took that initiative to her friend Afaf Fergani, a well-known journalist who has good connections with Libyan officials.
We reached out to the Libyan embassy in Egypt, but they were out of reach. Many people are stranded here. They have no money to pay rent or pay for healthcare. Under the current circumstances, the war in Libya has kept governments divided. It's difficult for them to accommodate these numbers of citizens.
The ladies then reached out to Libyan businessmen to finance their humanitarian efforts. They started preparing meals and distributing them to their fellow stranded citizens here.
The core reason for our initiative is to limit their need to go out into the streets. Egypt is a populous country, and many of the Libyans we support have health conditions, so they have immunity issues, and we fear they could get infected.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, they've been distributing hundreds of meals daily and buying medicine to support as many patients as they can. Youth would volunteer to borrow cars from the Libyan community to deliver the aid. They hope to get enough funds to keep these efforts going on until the borders reopen. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Diaspora remittances are a critical source of foreign currency earnings for Nigeria. Sometimes, in fact, they actually exceed what the company makes from selling oil and gas. Remittances last year, for example, are estimated at about $25 billion. But with the outbreak of this COVID-19 pandemic across the world and all the damage it's inflicting on economies, inflows to Nigeria are forecast to decline by quite some margin. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with what to expect.
For quite a number of Nigerians with relatives working abroad and who receive remittances frequently, the COVID-19 pandemic has been more or less a double jeopardy. Just as they're on lockdown in Nigeria, so are these relatives on lockdown abroad.
Some of them are out of work because of COVID-19. They will not have enough to send home to their relatives or to businesses or activities they have in Nigeria. So a drop is expected.
The World Bank estimates the drop in remittances could be up to 20%. An estimated 40 million Nigerians live outside the country. The Central Bank of Nigeria puts the total amount of their remittances in 2019 at 17.5 billion. But some other estimates put it higher, at $25 billion. The projected 20% decline would therefore have profound consequences for the individual recipients of the remittances.
These remittances are personal monies that have influenced livelihoods and are used as social safety nets by families and communities and also by commerce and industry here in Nigeria. Some of it is used to pay school fees, definitely that will be affected. Some of it is used for health, that will be affected. Some of it is used for social events like funerals, weddings, naming ceremonies, and the others. All those will be affected.
And it's not just the individual recipients who would be affected. Over the past few years, diaspora remittances have become an important source of forex for the country, edging out both foreign direct and portfolio investments in 2018 and helping to build up reserves. The drop could pile further pressure on the local currency, which has been devalued as dollar revenue from oil slumps.
It's now more urgent than ever that we address our local manufacturing capacity for two reasons. One is to reduce imports. The other is to increase exports, because there are captive markets, certainly in West and Central Africa and even Southern Europe, that we can easily export to if we have the right quality of products.
As the world begins to open up again after the prolonged COVID-19 induced lockdown, the remittances are expected to gradually begin to climb back up. But some analysts say it might take up to a year before the remittances get to their pre-COVID-19 levels. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos.
Ethiopian Airlines has been converting some of its passenger planes into cargo aircraft in order to improve its revenue streams, given a huge decline in passenger traffic to a lot of the routes it actually does operate on. Ethiopian Airlines CEO Tewolde Gebremariam said that the carrier has already converted 22 of its planes in order to meet growing demand for cargo. Here's CGTN's Beryl Oro with that report.
Engineers at Ethiopian Airlines are busy converting passenger planes into cargo freighters. With many countries having banned international flights, passengers around the world are grounded. Most countries have halted cross-border movements to curb the spread of the virus. This situation has hurt the aviation sector, forcing many airlines to adjust to survive. Many countries are prioritizing the importation of essential goods, and Ethiopian Airlines has scheduled more flights to ensure prompt delivery.
The majority are importers of COVID-19 personal protection equipment and medical supplies. And these are located in Africa, in Europe and America, and particularly Europe in the beginning when the COVID-19 spread was very high.
Ethiopian Airlines has not cancelled any jet purchases so far despite the collapse in air travel, though several orders, including some from Boeing and Airbus, have been delayed. The firm recorded a loss of $550 million between January and April, but has ruled out seeking a bailout from the Ethiopian government.
We are a little bit more optimistic. So we see some kind of maybe 50% recovery in the summer because it's a summer peak. And we see that people are sick and tired of the lockdown, as you can see in Europe and America. Governments are opening, even people are also going out because people were not meant to be locked up.
The global aviation industry has been hit by the coronavirus pandemic, forcing airlines that were once eager to order new planes to now scale back their flying schedules and park most of their planes. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And finally, Japan's economy is being hit pretty hard by the pandemic, and analysts are warning that the worst is yet to come. CGTN's Grace Lee filed this report from Tokyo.
Japan's economy officially entered into a recession with its annualized GDP down about 3.4%. Now, economists say that's not a surprise, seeing how Japan's economy was not doing well before COVID-19 hit. But with some of the restrictions that the pandemic poses, it's faring even worse. There's a lot of impact on consumer spending, with people staying at home as much as possible. Japan's stay-at-home orders was nationwide with its state of emergency, but that's been lifted for about 80% of the country, and the government is hoping that will blow in some new life into the economy. But however, experts say that with the lifting of the state of emergency, we might see a fresh new wave of COVID-19 cases, and they are still in high alert in places like Tokyo, Osaka, all of these big urban areas that still remain under this soft lockdown, and that's going to impact the economy. Experts and economists say that the numbers for April to June will likely be much worse than what we're seeing right now.
And I'll leave it there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour, though. We'll have a more extensive focus on aviation, including one of the more recent entrants into the aviation space, Uganda Airlines. How are they making use of the downtime in this pandemic to actually set themselves up for a proper revival? We'll explore that and plenty more with the company CEO at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Mahia.
Thanks, Rama. Well, still to come on this bulletin. We look at how South African DJ Black Coffee is spinning for COVID-19 relief. Welcome back. Let's take you to South Africa now, where internationally acclaimed DJ and music producer Black Coffee has raised thousands of dollars towards helping feed citizens who are hungry and in need during the coronavirus pandemic. Thuli Shabalala has that story.
He is one of South Africa's biggest musical export. Nkosinathi Innocent Maphumulo, whose stage name is Black Coffee, is known to blend classic electronic house music with other influences like jazz. He entertains millions of people in dance clubs all over the globe. Now he is using his love for music to reach those in need during the coronavirus pandemic.
I had a bigger dream of just raising R1 million. And I think we may at least raise 600,000. I take that as a big win. And just outside that, I think I kind of like help expose these entities to a crowd, you know, that it wasn't there before.
The popular DJ launched his Corona Care fundraiser in April. He keeps his followers entertained with live streams of his performances on social media pages. Black Coffee has raised over $5,000 so far and aims to double those digits. The funds will go to the millions left without food in South Africa during its coronavirus lockdown.
Quite an amazing journey. You know, it's been so nice playing music comfortably, you know, knowing that people every weekend they were tuning in. We had like really, really solid numbers every time we were streaming. And I think tomorrow I'm going to play a little bit more, maybe like for an hour and a half, because it's the last one. And then I need to kind of like go back to my drawing board now as an artist and see how to really create opportunities, you know, now next time I stream and, you know, to make sure that we earn some money.
Under global lockdowns and air travel bans, live gigs have dried up.
We perform for crowds, and crowds is a no-no. I'm not talking just local, international too. Like, it's gonna take a while for the health people to allow 1,000 people in a room. It doesn't matter what country, you know, and 1,000 people in the room means good business for the person who's doing the party. So if you're saying 80 people in the room, no one's gonna make a party for 80 people, even though it's possible, but no one is, because there's no money to be made.
It's going to take a while until DJs are filling up their usual spots. But for now, we can keep dancing to their music in our living rooms until the pandemic is over. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
And it's time for us to get into all the day's sports, beginning in Côte d'Ivoire. The country's National Committee of Elephant Supporters is one of the most colorful and vocal African football fan groups. Without their favorite game, they have been forced into looking for alternatives outside football to cope with the